Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Bonsoir. As I sat there and looked at the pictures 40, 50 years ago, as I listened to the words, I was reminded of Dr. King being in my living room. My father worked for him in South Carolina as one of the field organizers for the mobilization for the March on Washington. I can remember Dr. King, even as a young boy, reminding my father and those who sat in our living room that we can't let anybody turn us around. I was pleased that when I grew up, Mrs. King saw something in me and recruited me, and I worked with her in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and to help organize the 25th anniversary of the March on Washington. And then after that, working with Reverend Jesse Jackson's campaign as well when he ran for the Democratic nomination. And so this is it's a very personal moment for me. And so tonight, we're going to hear again from Dr. King. And we're going to be taken back in film to the days of the Civil Rights Movement. And I'm hoping, and I know that Fabienne and those who have put this together are hoping that something might stir in you, that you might remember those days and that something in those days might spring you forward. Right now, I'm going to call upon a very talented, very gifted young lady who will share the stage with me today, this evening, and will echo the words of, I believe, a great world leader. I'm going to ask Miss Jenny, and I'm going to get this right because we've been practicing her name all evening, Salgado. We're going to ask Jenny Salgado to come. Close your eyes. Listen to the words. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadows we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to the long, long end, a long night of their captivity.
Je suis heureuse de pouvoir être ici avec vous aujourd'hui à une manifestation dont on se rappellera comme étant la plus grande manifestation pour la liberté dans l'histoire de notre pays. Il y a 100 ans, un grand Américain à l'ombre de qui nous sommes aujourd'hui a signé la proclamation d'émancipation. Ce décret capital est arrivé comme une grande lumière d'espoir pour les millions d'esclaves qui avaient été brûlés par les flammes de la justice. Il est venu comme une aurore joyeuse pour terminer la longue nuit de leur captivité.
But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself exiled even in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
Nous sommes donc venus ici aujourd'hui pour dramatiser une condition honteuse.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to each and every American to say that you were full heirs. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note. insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds.
Mais nous refusons de croire que la Banque de la justice soit en faillite. Nous refusons de croire qu'il y ait des fonds insuffisants dans les grandes chambres fortes d'opportunités de cette nation. Par conséquent, nous sommes venus ici pour encaisser notre chèque. Le chèque qui nous donnera sur demande les richesses de la liberté et la sécurité de la justice. Nous sommes venus à ce lieu sacré pour rappeler au peuple américain l'urgence extrême du présent. Ce n'est pas le moment de nous adonner au luxe de nous détendre ou de nous contenter de la drogue tranquillisante d'une solution graduelle.
We have come to this hollow spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children.
Ce serait une erreur fatale pour la nation de refuser de voir l'urgence du moment. Cet été étouffant du mécontentement légitime du noir ne finira pas jusqu'à ce qu'arrive un automne vivifiant de liberté et d'égalité. 1963 n'est pas une fin, mais un commencement.
1963 is not an end, but a beginning.
Et ceux qui espèrent que le noir avait besoin de passer sa colère et qu'il est maintenant satisfait, auront un dur réveil si la nation revient à sa routine. Il n'y aura ni repos, ni tranquillité en Amérique, jusqu'à ce que le noir obtienne ses droits de citoyenneté. Les tourbillons de la révolte continueront à ébranler les fondements de notre nation, jusqu'à ce que le jour clair de la justice se lève à l'horizon. Mais il y a quelque chose que je dois dire à mon peuple, qui a le pied sur le seuil attrayant qui mène au palais de la justice. Tout en cherchant à obtenir la place qui nous est due, nous ne devons pas être coupables d'actions mauvaises. Ne cherchons pas à satisfaire notre soif de liberté en buvant dans la tasse de l'amertume et de la haine. Nous devons pour toujours conduire notre lutte sur un plan élevé de dignité et de discipline. Nous ne devons pas laisser nos revendications créatrices dégénérer en violence physique. Encore et encore, nous devons nous élever jusqu'aux hauteurs majestueuses où l'on réfute la force physique avec la force de l'âme.
The marvelousness of this new militancy, which has engulfed the Negro community, must not lead us to distrust all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up into our destiny. They've come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We can't walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back.
Il y a ceux qui demandent aux partisans des droits civiques: quand serez-vous satisfaits?
We can never be satisfied. As long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality, we can never be satisfied as long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways or the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied As long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote, and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing in which to vote for, no, we are not satisfied. And we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Je n'ignore pas que certains d'entre vous sont venus ici après de grandes épreuves et tribulations. Quelques-uns parmi vous sont récemment sortis de prisons étroites. Quelques-uns parmi vous sont venus de régions où, dans votre quête pour la liberté, vous avez été meurtris par les orages et la persécution et rendus chancelants par les vents de la brutalité de la police. Vous êtes les vétérans de la souffrance inventive. Continuez à travailler dans la foi que la souffrance non méritée est rédemptrice.
Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and the ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. So I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It's a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice.
Je rêve que mes 4 jeunes enfants vivront un jour dans une nation où ils ne seront pas jugés par la couleur de leur peau, mais à la mesure de leur caractère. J'ai un rêve aujourd'hui.
I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words interposition and nullification, that one day, down in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls and sisters and brothers. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and every mountain shall be made low, and every place will be made plain, and crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
C'est notre espérance.
This is my hope.
C'est la foi avec laquelle je retourne dans le sud. Avec cette foi, nous pourrons tailler dans la montagne du désespoir la stèle de l'espoir. Avec cette foi, nous pourrons transformer la cacophonie des discordes de notre nation en une belle symphonie de la fraternité. Avec cette foi, nous pourrons travailler ensemble, prier ensemble, lutter ensemble, aller en prison ensemble, défendre la cause de la liberté ensemble, sachant qu'un jour nous serons libres.
This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning the song, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing, land where my father died, land of a pilgrim's pride. Let it from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prestigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee.
Que la cloche de la liberté sonne du haut de chaque colline et de chaque butte du Mississippi. du fond de chaque montagne que sonne la cloche de la liberté.
And when this happens, and when we allow freedom to ring, when we let freedom ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jew and Gentile, Protestant and Catholic, will be able to join hands and sing the words of that old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.